I'd like to talk about collaboration. One of the projects that I work on is the Asia-Pacific Leaders Malaria Alliance. And as Bill Costello mentioned on Thursday night, we're about to move ahead with the roadmap to eliminate malaria in the Asia-Pacific region over the next 15 years. So let's just use this as a bit of an example or as a prototype for collaboration on the Sustainable Development Goals. This document is only 24 pages long. It's been a big part of my life for the past 2 years, and is a really good example of how difficult or how challenging collaboration can be. This was, first of all, the first year was spent getting the countries of the Asia-Pacific region just to agree on the goal to eliminate malaria. That took a year. That's a form of collaboration. And then to agree on this 24-page document to eliminate malaria, our work plan for the next 15 years, took another year. Please cross your fingers and hope for me that this will be approved at the East Asia Summit next month, because if it's not, we have to do it for another year. But this is a really good example of collaboration and some of the challenges. Now, in order to achieve malaria elimination, that is, get rid of all malaria in the whole of Asia-Pacific in the next 15 years. That means getting rid of active and people with disease malaria cases, but also all of the asymptomatic malaria parasite that exists. It's a huge challenge, but we're optimistic that it can be achieved. But this also highlights the essential collaboration that's required. So, for example, getting to this point has meant collaboration between governments, but now implementing it is going to be collaboration between governments, non-government organizations, researchers, the private sector, communities. All kinds of people are going to have to be brought together around this work plan. And it's not only different sectors that need to be brought together, but also different specialities, different disciplines. So, for example, we can't just talk to biomedical researchers or clinicians about this. We've got to talk to climate change specialists, to entomologists, to people that work on water and sanitation, urban development, all kinds of people. So it's interdisciplinary collaboration, but also intersectoral collaboration that's required. I'm going to be a bit negative and talk about some of the challenges to intersectoral collaboration and multidisciplinary collaboration that I've seen, particularly at the global level, before I then move on to solutions. So let's just say as a given, and I don't really know why I formatted this as a tweet, but there's a little clue there for you. We won't achieve a malaria-free Asia-Pacific region without interdisciplinary and intersectoral collaboration. And at the same time, if malaria elimination is a prototype for the SDGs and achieving them, we're not going to achieve the SDGs unless we achieve similar levels of collaboration. So this is my reminder that I'm going to talk about a few dirty secrets. And the first dirty secret I want to talk about is that many global health institutions are not able to collaborate because they're too busy competing with one another. We don't talk about this very much, but it's true. They compete for credibility, they compete for political attention, they compete for turf. Sadly, some of them even compete to be wrong the least. And some of the biggest organizations that we work with, global health organizations, are completely obsessed with not being wrong instead of being ambitious. And of course, we make all these organizations compete for money. That's just the way the system works. This is just one example. Over the last, we've known from the beginning of the HIV epidemic that TB is the leading cause of death among people living with HIV. But it's taken us so long to bring these two sectors together really effectively. And often this was because of cultural differences between organizations. And just imagine, for example, TB's got centuries of history. They have a completely different attitude towards rights-based approaches compared to the HIV sector, for example. But there were also personality clashes at the top of these global organizations that stopped them working together for about 5 years. And I know this, I saw it firsthand. It was just two people, couldn't talk to one another, held this back for 5 years. The other dirty secret is that all too often in global health, our talk fails us. And this is something I could talk about for hours and did at a workshop the other day, so forgive me if I say some of this again. But just like humans and us, we we have different ways of talking to one another. And if you're in a conversation and you're listening to a few things, you say something, you go backwards and forwards, at some point you reach a choice of whether or not to suspend your own opinion and just keep listening, just to kind of find out and identify what those possibilities might be. And organizations and institutions are in exactly the same position. And we're actually quite bad at thinking together, at really actively listening to one another. All too often, when there's when the stakes are high, we entrench into our positions and we defend our view of the world and what we believe is our correct view of reality. And this is what advocacy has partly become. We're advocating to one another that our view is right, and especially at times when the stakes are high. If you don't believe me, just think about the first 6 months of the Ebola response. We were unable to think and talk together. And it's at those moments when we really need to be talking together through constructive dialogue, having conversations that have a center instead of having two sides. That's when we fail the most. Okay, another dirty secret. That great solution, the internet, it's part of the problem. That's the only way I can say it. That we're so, I don't know if living in this era is a benefit or a curse. Because we're so inundated with information, we have to choose what we read, what we let into our world. Some people would argue that it's Google and Facebook that do that filtering for us, but that's not important. We do it for ourselves. We choose what to let in to our filter bubbles. Now, if we can adjust the way we do that, if we can think a little bit more openly about the information we let into our lives and our brains and why, then we can probably collaborate a bit more effectively. And actually, we've been talking a lot about design thinking the last few days. Right at the heart of that is this idea of creative and productive, generative dialogue. Without being more open to new ideas, design thinking is impossible. That's not a criticism, it's just an observation. So, but there is some optimism. There is some reason for optimism. And I'm going to talk a little bit about machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now, I don't agree with Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and all these others who say it's really dangerous. I think it holds real promise for more effective collaboration on the SDGs and global health-related issues. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes telling you why. Some of you will know about Watson, this new IBM supercomputer. It's currently, IBM, of course, started artificial intelligence really with Deep Blue in 1997. The computer that beat Garry Kasparov, even though it was alleged that the computer cheated. I don't know how they came to that conclusion. Watson is currently going through and analyzing millions of medical records in the hope that we will be able to detect new kinds of patterns that will help with diagnosis. That's brilliant. It might also help with at least excluding some of the steps of drug design and clinical trial process. Only 1% or something of drugs that enter trials end up finishing trials. They're excluded along the way. And if Watson can tell us or predict which of those molecules, which of those new drugs are more likely to actually make it, we can exclude some of the ones that won't and save some of that 99% of effort that is wasted. One of the ways this is playing out already, with just something like 16,000 case records, the diagnosis of septic shock has been improved significantly over the last year or so. This is really a life-threatening condition, and even having a few hours extra early warning in an individual patient that they might be showing warning signs can save a lot of lives, and this is clearly doing it with just 16,000 case studies. Another example of using machine learning is in the Solomon Islands, where by looking at climate patterns, particularly humidity and rainfall, we're able to now predict where malaria hotspots are likely to be 4 to 6 months in advance. That means we can deploy prevention and treatment resources in the places where they're most needed. Now, this is, if you like, it sounds like a simple form of collaboration, getting the health sector and the meteorological sector together. But they function in such different ways that this has been a fairly huge task, but a very successful one. And I could have given you 15 examples like this where meteorological data is finally being used for early warning systems for health outbreaks and other conditions. We need to understand much more about how this can be used to improve global health and collaboration. So let's go back to the SDGs, and this is the last piece I'd like to tell you about. I know nothing, let me tell you, I know nothing about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but I've been involved in a project for the past 2 years to develop a new tool, and we're very excited about this. The thinking was that we get the SDGs out of their boxes and look at them in more integrated ways. This is a little bit technical, but I'm not a technical person either, so let me just tell you how this works. This is like not Google. This is exactly the opposite of how Google works. So first of all, we ask a computer. We took some of the preliminary Sustainable Development Goal documents from the past 2 years, and we analyzed them and we found 600 keywords which were used frequently around the Sustainable Development Goals. And we said to a computer, go off and search the entire internet for places where these words are used. And they did, and it found 1.5 million websites that use these terms. And then we said to the computer, okay, now go and analyze the content of every article in that 1.5 million sites and analyze the frequency with which those words are used. And it did. It took a month of running on a supercomputer. That sounds impressive to me. I don't really know what supercomputers are, but we rent it from Amazon, apparently. I don't know. That's all I know. I pay the bill, but I don't. And it found 1 million related articles in a month. And now this does this process every 24 hours. And then we said, right, now get rid of that 600 keywords and just tell us what are the words that are actually used in that 1 million articles. And it came up with 470,000 keywords. So we have a database which started on the day that the SDGs were launched in New York, which will run continuously for 15 years to develop the complete corpus of material, newspapers, media, journal articles, all kinds of material that's ever published anywhere on the internet. I can't believe I'm actually saying that. And we don't know how useful that database will be or what it will be useful for. It might be useful for evaluation and monitoring. We don't know yet, but we know we need to build it. But what it's useful for now is we can say, okay, let me interrogate that database. And we say, let me put my own keywords into this and pull out all the articles that have the same kind of content fingerprint as my keywords. And then take those, and instead of just showing them to me the way Google would, take away now all of the articles that are directly related to my keywords. I hope you're following me. So this is, now what it's saying is, help me think laterally. I'm interested in malaria and climate change. Show me the articles that use the same kinds of content fingerprint, but are outside of my area of interest. So this is people, articles, subjects I wouldn't know about because I'm a malaria person. And then surprise me. Show me things that I wouldn't have thought of looking at. Show me organizations that I wouldn't have thought of looking at. And this is how it looks. It's very simple. You can see we did this last week when the results of the Canadian elections were coming out. Can you think, by the way, out of those 470,000 keywords, which is the most popular one? Can anybody guess? This is a clue. When it comes to the SDGs, the most popular word that's used the most is government. We didn't know that before. Now, after 15 years, we're going to know a little bit more. So the way that we think this is going to work is it's going to allow individuals to make connections between sectors with other individual people, to map this out for ourselves. In some ways, it takes away the need for an intermediary at the global level that would do this for us. The other thing that's really interesting is, supposing you search a particular combination and you don't find anything. Supposing we look at the keywords that people are searching and they're repeatedly asking a question and getting no answers, we're going to identify gaps that people regard as important, but for which there is no knowledge to share. And that's kind of an important point to highlight, gaps. All right, I'm going to wrap up. All I would say is please try it and tell us whether it works or how it can be improved. It's called sdginsights.org. It's open source in as much as no one has paid us to do this, And so it's available to be applied to any kind of sector, any organization. Just tell us how we can improve it. My company has made a commitment to run it for 15 years and keep it available as free for free for individuals. So let me just kind of conclude with a few observations about this, and then we can get on with the rest of the session. So last night, Jonathan said that attention is the most precious resource, natural resource, I think he said. If we can open our own filter bubbles and let a little bit more in, I think he was absolutely right. If we can open our own filter bubbles and let a little bit more information in than we would normally do in our little silo, we might just make a huge difference. And it's not going to be institutions that do this. What was it? In 2000, Time magazine said that the person of the year was you. Do you remember? Because it said it was going to be empowered individuals that are going to change the world. This is a really good example. And I think that over the next few years, it will be individuals that work out new forms of thinking together and collaboration. And then our institutions and organizations will catch up. Or we can just wait 10 years for them to do it, and then it'll be the same as the MDGs. No one knows what they are until the last few years. And this is a great quote. Kevin Kelly is the founding editor of Wired magazine, and he said, I've kind of paraphrased him here, but we spent the last 15 years digitizing everything we know. We just built the internet, we just filled it up. We've got so much unstructured data. We need to spend the next 15 years cognitizing it, and there's nowhere where that's more true than in global health. One of these was my job, and my hope is that one of you will take the second piece. It's going to be people taking this forward and cognitizing and making the most of this and using the results, or all of us that do that over the next 15 years that are going to make it possible to collaborate on the Sustainable Development Goals and achieve them. I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.